So the trailer for Bad Batch Season 2 is out, and it's hinted at some major changes within the clones. We're starting to see some early signs that they may have free will following the activation of Order 66, and so I figured today we could take a closer look at how much free will the clones actually had, and how much of a stranglehold was the inhibitor chip actually on the clones' personality and their choice in their actions. I'm Cullen, and this is Sci-Fi Deep Dive. Remember, if you enjoyed this video, to head down below and hit that subscribe button. So before we begin, I just want to get out there that obviously the clones didn't have a choice whether or not to carry out Order 66 in the moment. It was something forced upon them by the inhibitor chips, and while a lot of the clones didn't question the order, there were clearly some that struggled with it in very specific situations. Mostly clone commanders who had worked very closely with the Jedi they were intending to execute. However, there are questions surrounding the early days of the Empire. As we move further and further into the early days of the Empire, we're seeing more and more clones question whether Order 66 was right, whether they needed to follow those orders, and even a few clones seemingly start to lead small rebellions. And that raises the question, how strong of a stranglehold did the inhibitor chips have on the clones? Was it a momentary, uncontrollable impulse to carry out this order, or was it a full personality shift? Some of the things we see in the events of the first season of The Bad Batch seem to suggest that the inhibitor chips, when activated, changed the clones in their entirety, shifting their personality to something more cold and militaristic as opposed to the sort of lively and individual personalities the clones had during the conflict. Now that raises some questions. If some of the clones are opting to rebel, is it just some clones where the inhibitor chips maybe didn't activate all the way? Is it some clones where the activation of the inhibitor chip has simply worn off, or are these clones representative of the clone army as a whole? Does the hold of the inhibitor chip simply fade over time, allowing the clones to return to their normal selves and question their actions? Which, by the way, must be truly awful. Imagine waking up from what must feel like a nightmare to find that you had basically betrayed your brothers in combat, carrying out unthinkable orders in the name of a new government that you didn't even fully understand when you were given those orders. I could totally see this leading to more and more clones deciding to act out against the Galactic Empire. And this plays into another big conversation that has been circling around over the past couple months. Why exactly get rid of the clones? During the Clone Wars, we saw the clones were very effective in combat, so it would make sense the Galactic Empire would want to keep them around, but now we're starting to get a hint of what may be one of the larger reasons why the clones were ditched overall. I would wager that it is possible that the inhibitor chips simply were a momentary sort of control over their judgment, and as they wore off, the clones regained some level of free will, which allowed them to honestly choose not to serve the Galactic Empire. And as more and more clones came to that realization, Imperial leadership, particularly Emperor Palpatine, would become concerned that their entire army might mutiny, or even worse, there may be a coup. With those concerns, it makes sense to want to replace the clones, who would have had strong personal ties to the Jedi, with recruited soldiers, which could be sort of brought into the military more cheaply, easily, and quicker, and would honestly ultimately end up being more loyal to the Emperor and the Empire as a government. I would also like to take a moment to point out that this stands in very stark contrast to the way the clones were depicted in Legends. In Legends, they seemed to be fully loyal to the Galactic Empire and simply replaced over time as they aged out. We see, for example, during the campaign of Battlefront 2, that the clones were fiercely loyal to Imperial ideals all the way up to the Battle of Hoth, including an engagement that's fairly similar to what I think we're going to start seeing within The Bad Batch in Season 2, where the clone troopers, dating back to the Clone Wars, had to fight against a breed of new clones that had been bred to sort of fight against the Empire. This is during the Kaminoan Uprising. Ultimately, it paints the confusion among clone troopers and the complex feelings about going to war against your brothers, another factor that may have affected the Emperor's decision to replace the clones. All in all, though, the questions surrounding the free will of the clone troopers remains. Are they actually capable of making their own choices following the activation of Order 66, or are they basically just mindless drones at that point? Hopefully this is a question that the second season of The Bad Batch will answer, because it's kind of a burning question I have, for sure. The inhibitor chips themselves have actually been a really interesting topic, and I've done a video on them in the past, and I'll leave a link up here if you'd like to check that out. And I'd like you to let me know down in the comments whether you think the clones have free will following the activation of the inhibitor chips. Do you think that they're actually going to en masse be able to make decisions about who they want to serve, or do you think this is just a few scattered pockets where maybe their inhibitor chips didn't really work correctly? And if you have anything else you'd like to see me cover in Star Wars, leave it down below in the comments. And last but not least, if you enjoyed this video, head down below, hit the like button, the subscribe button, and the bell icon so you get notified when I upload new videos. So for Sci-Fi Deep Dive, I'm Colin, and I will see you next time.